Well, happy Friday. It is a beautiful autumn day here in Salt Lake City. The trees are changing color in the mountains. One of my favorite times of the year. I'm excited to think that the snows are coming as a skier, and that's all just around the corner. So today we're going to be talking in this Friday talk about why is Geospatial 2.0 different. And this is actually, I'm going to kind of personalize this a little bit. Some of this is based around some conversations I've been having this week. Talking of this week, I always like to throw up a couple of thoughts of the day, thoughts and questions of the day. So I threw these two up. The one on the left is actually, it was more of a technical one, but it struck me that there was some depth to this. Really, monitoring drone and LiDAR are expensive. How often do you need to see a power cord in 3D? Once, maybe twice a year. In INSAR, using Sentinel and Spot 7 with updates every 5 to 10 days is a better option. That's kind of why would he even put that up? There was some comments back and forth on that. What struck me was it was really a comment on INSAR and how INSAR can be used very effectively for monitoring. And I spoke about INSAR last week. There are these different areas of thought, where it's almost like this solution is a panacea. So the drone and LiDAR world tend to talk about that's really all you ever need to monitor, vegetation management, power lines, all that good stuff. But there are other ways to do things, and there is a little bit of I suppose it's a sales angle which says, you only need to buy us and we'll give you everything. There are different ways to do things, and in this case, actually, sometimes a bit more inexpensive. So I'm not going to argue one or other case. A friend of mine actually told me about that, and I thought I'd throw it up. But it was that bigger point that I thought it's always worth exploring other options and not presuming that one thing is a panacea. The one on the right is just a continuation of other things I've said in the past. But it really struck me again. It really came home to me after I was on a GIS-focused call this week. I'll read it to you. GIS is one part of Geospatial 2.0. Why a smaller part of a bigger whole? 2.0 takes a geospatial data first perspective, 2D, 3D, 4D, whereas GIS still has a map first perspective. And I think that's an important one. And again, I've sort of labored that one a little bit in the past, but it really struck me that GIS without question falls under the geospatial umbrella, but it's different in that it's really map centric and continues to be. And the industry is trying to move away from that map centric notion, but the purveyors, the experts in that field continue really to think, how can we apply a map to solve a problem, which is a much narrower thought process than what is the wider Geospatial 2.0 conversation. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to personalize this. Like I said, I like that picture, so I was trying to find a way to put that in there. Head in a box. That's actually a think box, which is something that I actually try to do. I try to have my own thinking head on. But take the think box out of it. There is a tendency for us, all of us, not just people in geospatial, to think very narrowly, to not widen our thinking. We are threatened by new things. We know what we know. All of those good things. So we generally sort of sit in this box mentally and are too scared to, don't have time to explore a wider world. So I spoke last week about some of the technologies in 2.0. I spoke about INSAR and radar, I spoke about satellite imagery and LiDAR. All of the experts in those fields work in their own fields, in large part disconnected. That's becoming less and less true. But like I've said at the top, think the same, do the same. We have a tendency to narrow our fields of focus into what we know. And artificially, I argue, we've separated out these disciplines and put them in under their own separate groups, if you like. That's not completely true, but the point of it is there isn't sort of a synergy between those groups in general terms. I'll talk about the sales process as well, and I'll reference back. I remember actually a chap that I worked with some time ago who he had worked in the IT field, but he never worked in geospatial. And he went into a CIO of a public sector organization who was not technical and gave a flashy demonstration, and then essentially asked the CIO if he would like to buy the 3D digital reality platform work toolkit that was part of his group of things he was selling. And it didn't lead to a sale, and it never really led to any ongoing conversations with that guy. widget selling is not something that we do anymore. Widget selling is thinking in a box. It's how we used to do things. We're moving away from that world. And folks that are still applying that approach are not widening their perspective. In that particular guy's case, I'm not claiming him. He didn't actually have the training to go wider than that. That was the problem. It wasn't actually him per se. One other thing that I sort of wanted to think about in a box, and this is really and I'll touch on this later in this talk, social media selling. It's always happening in LinkedIn. I see people complaining about it. That blog post or that LinkedIn post I put up there was basically me saying, if I read another post in LinkedIn that has got a product sale as part of it, even a product name in there without any explanation as to why it's there, I'm turned straight off. So social media has been used in a way of selling. Again, it's being used as a selling medium when it never should be, but because people are still narrow in their thinking about how they do things, so they're still in that head in the box approach. So personal brands. Now, Bruce Buxton, my colleague, is an expert at personal brands, and I'm not an expert, but I'm becoming better as the more I talk to Bruce, and this struck me as very relevant because it's very personalized. This. So a personal brand is linked to one's core passions, one's DNA. Its definition is an expression of purpose or why. I want to talk about personal brands here because I think they're incredibly relevant to this 2.0 conversation, certainly for me. And I think that I take my wiring in my non-work life and bring it to my work. And that's why I love doing what I do. And in my case, my personal brand, if I was to define it, is probably think differently, act differently. And that's how I like to see things. I don't want to just follow like a sheep. I do want to step away and think about how this is slightly differently. And we see a world I'm afraid our world is too driven in we listen to something and then repeat what we've just heard instead of processing it and thinking slightly differently about it. So my own personal brand is kind of that. But I realize that I've really taken what I'm wired to enjoy doing in life in general and apply that in my working life. And again, I'll underline the fact that it brings me and my work together, and my work doesn't feel like work. It feels like a continuation of myself. So a personal brand is linked to one's core passions, and it's a definition of purpose or why. Actually, in this case, it should be the geospatial linkage that's important here. So geospatially think differently, act differently. And that's really what Geospatial 2.0 is. I mean, I didn't come up with the term Geospatial 2.0, but in many ways, that's my expression in my working life of my own personal brand. And I think that it's important that we all, I'm not going to say necessarily, Bruce might disagree with me. I say Bruce believes we should all have a personal brand. And I probably do agree with him on that one, but I'm not sort of forcing it down people's throats, nor is Bruce. But I do think it's important to define what that is, that is how you're wired, and then see how in your world you can apply that. And in the geospatial world, there are so many people that feel passionate about so many different things. Maybe you just love making maps. Maybe it's sustainability that you focus on. I mean, there are so many areas that we have this passion for. Well, we can apply that in our job. And it's sort of, if you can define that piece and you can bring that to bear in your work, guess who's going to get the most out of it? You are, your employer is, the world potentially is as well. I mean, it's that important. So, I can't underline more how important I think that this is. And I think that social media, I mentioned social media earlier, I'm going to go back to social media. Social media is largely misused. Social media is a way to connect with people who have a shared purpose, shared interest, like I've said at the top there. And I showed this last week. This actually came from Nadine. This is a semi-quote from Nadine, OGC. And she was absolutely spot on. It was a thought of the day. Waiting for the world to understand what we do and the value of what we do is not an option anymore. 2774 views of that post. It's the most probably thought of the day views I've ever had. Those people are interested in that. Those people share the same sentiment as I share and Nadine shares in this place. We are the people that should be connecting. And if we have that shared purpose, almost that wiring that's similarly or complementary gosh, what could we do together? What could we do together? And that's almost my shout out within Geospatial 2.0, is to connect together for us actually to move these things forward, not to talk about stuff, but to make things happen. I'm going to finish with one. I'm running out of time, but I always finish with this, because to me, this is the personification. This is the expression of Geospatial 2.0. This is a data-led conversation. It's a data-led conversation, not with customers, but in our own minds about how we widen our thoughts in geospatial. It isn't narrow to GIS or remote sensing or 3D live, whatever it is that you're focused on. It's a much bigger conversation than that. And we have to widen our thinking. 2D's for patterns, 3D is a sense of place, what is and what could be, 4D is change. Those are at the heart of the technology and of the conversations that we can have with customers in our world. And this is actually how we are going to change the world. So thanks for watching. A little bit personalized today. You can reach me at matt.sheehan@critigen.com. I love stuff when people share stuff with me. I just love it. Right, wrong, agree, disagree. I just want that because it helps me build the perspective, build these talks, build the thought process that I've got to connect these with you and make a difference. You know, we're here to make a difference, and together we can make a difference. We can't do it on our own. So thanks for watching. Enjoy your weekend. Talk to you next week.